The spaceport of Nixara stank of engine fumes and strange spices that clawed at the back of the throat. Captain Cole Payne pulled his collar higher against the glare of the twin suns, his sandy hair catching the light in quick flashes before. He ducked back into shadow. The armor that clung to him drank in the heat, matte black plates that had once turned blaster fire on half a dozen battlefields. It weighed less than memory, and yet more than he cared to admit. At his side padded Argo, the big shepherd silent as a shadow, ears twitching toward every shouted bargain and every hissed curse in the crowded bazaar. The treaty was too new. 3 months wasn't long enough to scrape blood from stone. And everywhere Cole turned, he saw eyes that weighed him as an enemy first, a guest second. He had not signed up for this. Babysitting diplomats, smiling at aliens who had butchered friends on battlefields far from home. He'd take the clean honesty of war over this charade of peace any day. But orders were orders. And orders had brought him here, into the press of bodies, through alleys slick with oil and incense, past vendors who turned their faces away as though his humanity were a disease. "Excuse me, human sir." The voice was small, delicate, almost absurd against the roar of the crowd. Cole stopped, frown already pulling at the scar that cut across his jaw. He looked down. 3 figures stood in the shade of a half-collapsed awning, emerald-skinned children dressed in lilac silks finer than anything this part of the port should have seen. Their pale hair was braided in careful coils, their wide eyes steady even, as their hands twisted nervously in front of them. "What?" His tone was sharper than he intended. The tallest stepped forward with a formality that reminded him uncomfortably of an officer's briefing. Your term is lost. Our guardian was to meet us in the central plaza. We cannot find our way back." Cole's eyes swept the district around them, the alleys that stank of rust and hate, the workers who glanced once at the children's finery and looked quickly away. Too far from the plaza, too close to neighborhoods where the anti-human banners still hung like fresh scars. "Where's your escort?" he demanded. "She was separated from us when the crowd surged at the Merchant Square," the girl answered. Her voice held composure, but he saw the trembling at her throat. Cole cursed under his breath. "Walk away," a voice in him urged. Not his problem, not his fight. He had buried too many comrades to waste his life in a marketplace. And yet children, even Vidian children, whose kin had burned colonies and slaughtered Marines. He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "Fine, I'll get you back. Stay close, don't touch anything. And don't wander off." They nodded, solemn little shadows trailing him as Argo dropped behind, protective instinct already flaring in the set of his shoulders. The smallest giggled once, reaching out to bury tiny fingers in Argo's fur, and the sound was so fragile, so startling, that Cole felt something shift against the iron plates inside his chest. The walk should have been quick. Instead, every turn forced detours. Every glance reminded him how exposed they were. The farther they pressed toward the plaza, the quieter the port grew. Vendors shuttered stalls. Guards shifted nervously. Whispers rode the air. Something was happening. Then came the thunder of boots. Armored feet striking in unison, voices barking orders in the harsh Vidian tone. The eldest girl's face paled. "Royal Guard," she whispered. "Please, we cannot be found here." Cole swore, scanning the street. No options. He herded them into the shadow of a towering support pillar, the dock above humming with departing freighters. The workers had already fled, empty, silent, safe enough for now. He dropped heavily against the concrete, the armor clanking, and gestured. "Sit, keep quiet." They obeyed without protest. To his surprise, the 3 small forms pressed themselves against him, curling into the crook of his arms, as though the metal plates and scarred flesh beneath promised safety, no other could. Talia at his left shoulder, Mira and little Lena on his right, their heads nestling into the creases of armor and scar tissue. He stiffened, then slowly let his arms fall protectively around them. Argo settled in front, a living wall between them and the empty street dot. He told himself it was only for a moment, just until the commotion died. But the warmth of their small bodies seeped through the cold metal, and the exhaustion of too many years without rest pressed down on him. His eyes slid shut. Cold pain dreamed of nothing. He woke to cold steel against his throat. A dozen armored Vidian guards ringed the pillar, weapons glinting in the artificial lights. Argo growled low, teeth bared, hackles raised. And still miraculously, impossibly, the three princesses slept peacefully curled against his chest. Human, a voice hissed, thick with command. Do not move. The blade at his throat gleamed with a faint blue shimmer, the edge vibrating with restrained energy. Cole shifted his eyes, not his head, measuring the ring of armored soldiers. Their helmets reflected the lights of the dockyard, faceless, impassive. Argo's growl deepened, a warning rumble that promised violence if a single step came too close. Cole lifted a hand slowly, fingers curling toward the dog. Stand down, he murmured, his voice low and steady. The shepherd's ears flicked back, but he obeyed, muscles quivering, eyes locked on the nearest guard. The line of soldiers parted. A figure emerged, tall, regal, wrapped in ceremonial armor of green gold that caught the light like liquid fire. She moved with predatory grace, her headdress sweeping upward in ornate spines, her skin darker than her daughter's, her gaze sharp enough to pierce steel. Cole didn't need an introduction. He had seen her face on 100 propaganda screens, studied her battle plans across star maps stained with blood. This was Empress Valora the Unyielding, the Vidian sovereign who had led armies against humanity for 15 brutal years. The children stirred at last, blinking drowsily at the sudden lights. The smallest Lena yawned, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. Then she saw the towering figure and squealed, "Mother!" Valora's expression cracked, if only for an instant. She knelt, arms opening, and Lena rushed into them, followed by Mira and Talia with more composure but no less relief. The circle of guards bowed their heads as the Empress embraced her daughters, whispering softly in their native tongue. Cole stood very still, throat tight beneath the humming blade still poised against him. At last, Valora rose. The girls clung to her skirts, their gazes flicking back to Cole. Her eyes followed theirs, fixing on the human who had been their shield. "This," she said in accented but flawless English, "is not what I expected to find." Her voice carried the weight of command, yet beneath it was an undercurrent of something else: curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. Cole straightened, moving with deliberate calm. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing with a soldier's brevity. "Captain Cole Payne, Terran Marine Corps. You have something that belongs to me." She gestured to her daughters. "With respect," he replied evenly. "They found me. They were lost in the industrial district. Dangerous territory for anyone, especially children." A flicker of something crossed her features. Concern quickly, masked by cold authority. "And you decided to what? Abduct them? Use them as leverage?" The guards shifted, grips tightening on their weapons. Argo's growl returned, sharp and deadly. Cole kept his voice calm, his eyes locked on hers. "I decided to protect them, which is more than I can say for whoever was supposed to be watching them." Silence hung like a blade ready to fall. The Empress's eyes narrowed, and Cole braced himself. He knew too well how easily this fragile piece could fracture here, and now with his execution as the spark. Then, to his astonishment, Valora laughed. a rich, melodic sound that startled her guards as much as it did him. "You have courage, Captain Payne. Few would dare speak so boldly to me." Her gaze dropped to her daughters, who clutched at her hands, their faces open and earnest. "And fewer still would earn such trust from my children. They are selective." As if to prove her words, Lena broke free and scampered back to Cole's side, slipping her small hand into his gaunted one. "He kept us safe, Mother. And Argo is very brave." The shepherd's ears twitched at his name, tail wagging once as though in agreement. Valora studied the tableau: the child's trust, the dog's loyalty, the human's unflinching posture. Something unreadable passed over her face. Then she inclined her head, a gesture both regal and dangerous. "Very well. Captain Payne, you will accompany us to the palace. There are conversations to be had." Cole felt the weight of inevitability settle over him. He had come to Nixara to keep a low profile, to ride out the uneasy truce. Instead, he had stumbled into the heart of Vidian royalty, with a queen who looked at him not only as an enemy soldier, but as something far more complicated. He glanced down at Lena, still clutching his hand, her emerald eyes shining with unshaken trust. Resigned, Cole exhaled slowly. Whatever path this was, there was no turning back. The guards closed in, weapons lowered, but not forgotten. The Empress turned, her daughters clustered around her like orbiting stars. And so, with Argo pacing faithfully at his side, Captain Cole Payne followed the fiercest queen of the galaxy into the labyrinth of her palace, unaware that his fate had just been bound to hers. The Vidian royal palace was a fortress dressed as a temple, a sprawl of spires and terraces carved from stone that shimmered faintly green under the twin suns. Captain Cole Payne followed Empress Valora through its echoing halls, his boots heavy against polished floors that had never known the dust of war. Argo padded silently beside him, a shadow made flesh, drawing wary glances from every guard they passed. The princesses trotted just ahead, whispering to one another in their native tongue, throwing shy glances back at him that carried both gratitude and something far more dangerous: trust. Cole had never felt more out of place. Battlefields he understood. Ambushes, firefights, tactical retreats, those he could map in his bones. But here, amid courtiers whose every smile was sharpened like a blade, he felt exposed in ways armor could not defend. Valora seemed to sense it. She moved like the center of gravity itself, commanding the air without needing to raise her voice. Her daughters clung to her skirts as she dismissed the guards with a flick of her hand, then turned to Cole. "Stiff, Captain," she observed, circling him in a private training arena hidden deep within the palace. The chamber was vast, ringed with carved reliefs of past emperors and queens. At its center lay a floor of pale stone, scuffed with centuries of ceremonial combat. She carried no visible weapon, yet the way her eyes pinned him felt like a challenge in itself. "In human combat training," Cole said, dropping into a marine stance, "stability creates power. Interesting." She stepped closer, her tall frame gliding with predatory ease. "But in Vidian combat, power lies in flow. Stone may stand, but water reshapes worlds." She reached for his shoulders without asking, her long fingers adjusting his posture with precise, lingering touches. Cole's breath caught despite himself. He told himself it was simply her proximity, the alien heat of her presence, but the truth gnawed at him. It was more. "Your species radiates warmth," she mused, her palms resting against the hard line of his arms. "A biological advantage in combat, perhaps?" "It has its uses," Cole replied, forcing his voice level, "especially on cold planets." Her lips curved in something almost sly. "And does it serve other purposes?" Before he could answer, alarms split the air. Harsh, jarring, echoing off stone. Valora's expression hardened. every trace of warmth vanishing. She snapped a command into her wrist device, voice clipped. Perimeter breach, eastern quadrant. Royal Guard to defensive positions. Cole's gut twisted. The princesses, where are they? In the garden pavilion, Valora said, already striding for the door. Their tutors, with respect, are not waiting. Cole was running before she could finish, Argo springing to his side as though the command had been shared in thought instead of voice. The corridors blurred, guards pressing back against the walls as the human tore past, a storm of armor and urgency. The garden sprawled in a maze of exotic flora, glowing vines curling up ivory columns, petals shimmering with alien luminescence. At their heart lay the pavilion, delicate and open, where the three princesses and their tutors huddled in terror. Cole saw the smoke of blaster fire first. Then the bodies of 2 royal guards crumpled, armor charred. 3 intruders in stealth gear advanced, weapons gleaming. Cole didn't think. He charged. The first assailant turned too slowly, caught off guard by the impossibility of a human. Cole slammed into him shoulder first, the impact carrying them both to the ground. A sharp strike to the throat silenced him before he could cry out. Energy bolts screamed past, scorching stone where Cole had been an instant earlier. Argo hit. The second like a missile, teeth clamping onto the attacker's arm with a wet crunch. The weapon clattered away as the mercenary shrieked. Cole rolled, seized the fallen blaster, and fired 2 clean shots, one to the leg, one to the shoulder, dropping the third before he could reach the pavilion. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken. 30 seconds to turn chaos into silence. Cole rose, chest heaving, weapon steady. Argo released his grip with a growl, standing over the downed assailant like a warden. Slowly, Cole lowered the weapon, scanning for more threats. Then came the sound he hadn't expected: cheers. The princesses rushed toward him, their small faces alight with admiration. "That was amazing," Talia exclaimed. "You moved so fast. Are you hurt?" Mira asked, tugging at his gauntlet. Cole crouched, scanning each of them quickly, hands steady despite the adrenaline burning his veins. "You're safe. That's what matters." Their tutor bowed deeply, voice trembling with relief. "Your intervention was most timely, Captain. Without you, Valora arrived then, sweeping into the garden like a storm given flesh, her personal guard flanking her." Her gaze fell on her daughters, unharmed, then on Cole standing in the wreckage, weapon still in hand. For a heartbeat, fury crackled around her, aimed at the guards, the breach, the audacity of it. Then her eyes softened, just slightly, as they landed on him. "You disobeyed protocol," she said. "With respect, Majesty," Cole replied. "Protocol doesn't matter when children are in danger." Gasps rippled through the assembled guards. To speak so directly to the Empress was unheard of. And then she smiled. A small, dangerous smile that carried more weight than 1,000 decrees. "No, it doesn't. Behold the actions of our human liaison. While others debated procedure, he acted. Remember this." The guards struck their fists against their breastplates in salute. Not to her. To him. Cole stood frozen, realization sinking in. He had not just saved children. He had stepped into the heart of the Empire, and now the Empress herself was watching him with eyes that promised both danger and something far more entangling. The palace alarms shrieked again, rolling through corridors in a metallic wail that rattled even Cole's battle-hardened nerves. He had just returned to his quarters, still riding the adrenaline from the garden fight, when the crimson lights flared. Argo snapped up from where he'd been dozing, teeth bared, ears straining toward the sound. Cole was already on his feet, sidearm drawn. Valora's voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. "Status report." She barked into her comm. The reply came with hesitation that Cole didn't like. "Your Majesty, the alarm was triggered from the royal wing. The princess's quarters. Every drop of blood in Cole's body seemed to lurch toward his fists. He was moving before Valora gave the order, boots hammering marble. The corridors blurred, guards scattering aside as he and the Empress stormed toward the children's rooms. For Cole, the path was pure instinct: protect, defend, shield. For Valora, it was command, her voice snapping orders, her presence turning chaos into order. When they burst into the royal quarters, Cole braced himself for carnage. He expected blood, bodies, an ambush. Instead, the scene that greeted him left him momentarily stunned. 3 little girls sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by an explosion of toys and elaborate Vidian board games. Their faces tilted upward with the most innocent of expressions, feigned surprise painted too carefully across them. Mother. Captain Payne, Talia exclaimed with rehearsed delight. What a surprise! Valora's eyes narrowed. Indeed. Almost as surprising as the palace-wide alarm that originated from this room. Cole's weapon lowered as the absurdity of it sank in. Argo padded forward, sniffing the air. Lena immediately buried her face in his fur, muffling the giggles she couldn't contain. Perhaps a malfunction, Cole offered, struggling to keep his face straight. Perhaps, Valora said flatly, though the glint in her eyes betrayed amusement beneath the steel. A malfunction that coincidentally coincides with bedtime? We couldn't sleep, Talia said quickly. We were discussing human customs. Cole's brow rose. Human customs? Yes, Lena piped up, muffled against Argo's neck. Like how humans show affection. It is very different from Vidians. Valora turned her head slowly toward him, her regal mask betraying just the faintest of smiles. Is that so? And what have you learned of human affection? Mira, the quiet one, chimed in without hesitation. Humans kiss with their mouths. Vidians touch foreheads and palms. But humans press their lips together. And hold hands, Talia added helpfully. And when they sleep, they like to be very close. Like when we curled up on Captain Payne. Heat crept up Cole's neck beneath his collar. He coughed, searching for words that didn't come. That's not? Exactly. And they mate for life, Lena declared triumphantly, pulling back from Argo with a grin. Like the birds in the garden. Silence crashed down. Cole stared at the ceiling, praying for another Rexian attack to break the tension. Anything would be better than standing here with the galaxy's most feared queen, while her daughters casually speculated about his romantic customs. That's quite enough anthropology for tonight, Valora said, her tone severe, even as her eyes sparkled with suppressed laughter. Now, which of you triggered the alarm? 3 pairs of eyes dropped guiltily to the floor. It was my idea, Talia confessed. But Mira knew how to bypass the security protocols, and Lena pressed the button. Cole bit back a laugh. He had seen squadron conspiracies with less coordination. Valora folded her arms. A collaborative effort. And may I ask why you deemed it necessary to plunge the palace into emergency lockdown? The girls exchanged glances before Talia spoke, her voice steady. We wanted to see if Captain Payne would come to rescue us again. And, Mira added with innocent sincerity, we wanted to see if you would come together. Cole pressed his lips tightly to keep from smiling. These children were terrifying in their own way. Valora exhaled slowly, regal composure hard-won. I see. Well, your experiment has yielded results. Now it is time for consequences. No garden. Privileges for 3 days, and you will personally apologize to the head of palace security tomorrow. The girls nodded solemnly, though Cole noted their eyes still sparkled with mischief. Captain Payne will escort me back to my study, Valora said firmly. You 3 will go to sleep immediately. Is that understood? Yes, Mother. They CHORUSED. As the door closed behind them, Valora allowed herself a soft laugh, the sound rich and private. I apologize for my daughter's meddling. They seem to have developed. Quite an attachment to you. No apology needed. Cole replied, "They're smart kids." "Too smart," Valora muttered. Then her eyes slid back to him, gleaming. "And not wrong about everything." The air between them tightened, charged with something unsaid. Valora leaned closer, her voice low, silk over steel. "Vidians do touch foreheads and palms. But we are not ignorant of other methods." Cole's pulse jumped, and in that moment, before words could find him, he realized the princesses might have set something in motion far larger than their prank. The palace seemed quieter than usual the next day, though Cole suspected it was an illusion. Quiet in a place like this meant whispers had simply slithered out of earshot. He walked the marble corridors with Argo at his side, senses taut, the memory of the princess's prank still fresh in his mind. Mischief was one thing, but his gut told him there was something deeper gnawing at the edges of the Empire's calm, something no alarm could disguise. He didn't have to wait long. That evening, the three girls came to him in their nursery, slipping past their tutors with conspiratorial grins that instantly hardened into solemn expressions when the door closed. Talia, the eldest, spoke first, her voice low and serious in a way that made her seem far older than her years. "Captain Payne, we heard something we weren't supposed to." Cole crouched to their level, Argo lowering his head beside him. "All right, tell me." Mira's hands twisted in her lilac sleeves. "We were hiding in the garden fountain during lessons. Lord Naxes and Lady Perth were speaking nearby. They didn't know we were there." The name landed like a hammer blow. Naxes, the Minister of Security. Cole had never trusted the man. Too polished, too precise, his courtesy a thin veneer over disdain. "What did you hear?" Talia's green eyes fixed on him. "They said the plan was almost ready. That soon the royal line would be." She stumbled on the foreign word. "Purified." Mira whispered. Cole felt ice creep down his spine. "Go on." Lena, the youngest, piped up, her small voice trembling. "They said you would be blamed, that the humans would be hated again, that the Empress would die." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. Cole's jaw clenched, his mind replaying every interaction with Naxes, the cold politeness, the probing questions, the faint sneer that never reached his mouth. He had suspected hostility. He had not expected open treachery. "You're certain?" he asked. The girls nodded in unison. "We know what we heard," Talia said. Cole exhaled sharply, weighing his next move. Going to Valora without proof would be reckless, but doing nothing could mean her death. "Is there a way back to where you are hiding? Somewhere I can listen for myself?" The sisters exchanged glances, and Lena tugged at his gauntlet. "We know a secret." Behind the nursery's shelves lay a narrow passage, half forgotten, half forbidden. The girls had discovered it by accident, a toy rolling where it shouldn't. They led him to the hidden scene, fingers pressing a latch worn smooth by centuries. Stone shifted with a sigh, revealing a tunnel that smelled of dust and old air. Cole ducked inside, shoulders scraping the walls. It was barely wide enough for a human, but perfect for three small princesses. Argo padded behind, his nails clicking on the stone. They guided him through twisting corridors until a faint grate opened onto the royal garden. A fountain gleamed beyond, and in its shadow stood Naxes himself. Cole pressed closer, ears straining. The Rexian mercenaries failed, but no matter. Naxes hissed to Lady Perth, who stood draped in silver finery. "Tonight, the human dies in her chambers. The Empress will fall, and the alliance will shatter. The princesses will be unfortunate. Casualties' sympathy will flow to the council, which we control." Lady Perth inclined her head. "And humanity will be painted as assassins once more." Cole's blood turned molten. A coup. A false flag. Not just treason against Valora war, reignited across the stars. He backed away, motioning the girls to silence. They padded with him through the tunnel, their faces pale, their eyes wide with the gravity of what they had witnessed. Emerging in the nursery, he closed the passage and dropped to one knee before them. "You three did the right thing," he said, voice steady, though his pulse thundered. "But now you must do something even harder. You must stay with your guards. No hide and seek, no secret passages, not until this is over." "Is Mother in danger?" Talia asked, her voice breaking. "Yes," Cole said honestly. "But I'm going to protect her. That's what human knights do." The smallest smile flickered across their lips at the familiar word. Even Argo seemed to understand, settling between them as a guardian. Cole rose, his decision already carved into stone. The time for shadows was over. Empress Valora needed to know her empire was rotting from the inside, and only he carried the proof. He strode toward the council wing, the children's frightened whispers chasing him like echoes. Behind him, Argo gave a single low bark, as if to remind him he was not alone. And ahead, Cole could already see the collision course warrior and queen against traitors who thought themselves untouchable. Midnight draped the Vidian palace in a hush so deep that even the fountains in the garden seemed to whisper rather than sing. Cole Payne stood in Valara's private chambers, the weight of borrowed ceremonial armor pressing on his shoulders. The plates shimmered faintly with iridescent green, echoing the Empress's own regalia, though his bore the plain lines of a soldier rather than the flourishes of a sovereign. He flexed his wounded arm once, the shoulder still burned from where Naxxus's blade had grazed him during the garden attack. The scar had not yet healed, but it was enough to remind him how close the Empire's future had come to ending. Valora moved with deliberate calm, fastening the last clasp at his collar. Her hands were steady, but her eyes, those sharp emerald orbs, flickered with fire. "Are you certain this will work?" Cole asked, watching her reflection in the tall glass of the chamber doors. "No," she admitted, a faint curve to her lips. "But certainty is an illusion. What we have is preparation. The rest is will." She leaned closer, her forehead brushing his in the Vidian gesture of trust. "And I trust you, Captain." Cole's jaw tightened. "Children are secured?" "Triple. Guard. And your Argo refuses to leave their side," Valora said with a ghost of a smile. "I almost pity anyone foolish enough to test him." "Almost," Cole echoed. The plan was simple. Too simple, Cole thought, but sometimes simplicity was deadliest. Valera would appear to retire for the night, her form a decoy beneath the silk canopy of her bed. Cole would depart in plain sight, then circle back through the secret passages the princesses had revealed. When the conspirators came, thinking to frame him for murder, they would find more than a sleeping empress. The bells tolled midnight dot in the suffocating silence of the hidden passage. Cole crouched, sidearm drawn, his breath steady. Through the narrow grate, he could see Valora's chamber, lit only by a single lamp. The silken mound of the bed shifted faintly with each false breath of the combat dummy beneath the covers. A scrape. A seam in the wall yawned open. 4 figures slipped through like shadows. Naxxus's Lady Perth, and 2 guards Cole recognized from the minister's personal detail. Weapons gleamed in their hands. "Remember," Naxxus whispered, "the human kills her, then we kill him. Evidence must be clear." The words had barely left his mouth before Cole moved. He burst from the hidden passage with a soldier's roar, sidearm raised, weapon sight locking on Naxxus. "Not tonight," he growled. Shock froze the traitors for a heartbeat. Valora rose from the antechamber, guards flooding in behind her. Steel in her voice. "Lord Naxxus, this is an unexpected visit." The minister's sneer twisted into open hatred. "You let the human poison your throne. I will save the Empire from corruption, if I must cut it from your heart." His blade snapped, free, humming with energy. But instead of striking Cole or Valora, he spun toward the wall grate, the very one where the princesses had been watching earlier. His eyes blazed with desperation. If I cannot purify the line one way, I will another. Cole didn't think. He hurled himself between Naxxes and the grate. The blade slashed down, searing through his borrowed armor, biting into his shoulder. The pain was fire, but he locked his jaw and drove forward, using his own body to block the path. Not while I breathe, he snarled. Argo exploded from the shadows with a snarl that rattled the chamber, slamming into Naxxes' side. The traitor stumbled, his blade spinning free as the shepherd's teeth sank into his arm. Cole followed through with a brutal strike, disarming him and slamming him to the floor. Chaos erupted. Valora's loyal guards clashed with Perth's conspirators. Sparks filled the chamber as blades and rifles screamed. Lady Perth bolted for the secret passage only to find her escape blocked. 3 small figures had shoved a heavy decorative urn across the corridor, their faces fierce with childish defiance. Talia's voice rang out, clear and unshaken. No more hiding. It was over quickly. The conspirators were overwhelmed, dragged down in chains, Naxxes bleeding and spitting curses as he was pinned beneath Argo's weight. Cole staggered, clutching his shoulder. The pain clawed at him, but he stayed on his feet. Valora swept forward, her composure unbroken, even as she pressed a vial of glowing salve to his wound. Her hands were steady, but her voice was softer than he had ever heard. "That was foolish," she murmured, smoothing the salve across the burn. "Brave, but foolish." It worked, Cole managed through gritted teeth. The door burst open. Then, the princesses rushing in with wide eyes, heedless of orders to remain behind. "Is Captain Payne all right?" Talia asked breathlessly. "He will live," Valora said, dry but tender. "Not for lack of trying to kill himself in front of you." The girls smiled with relief, pride shining in their emerald eyes. "He was a hero," Mira whispered. "He jumped in front of Lord Naxxes' blade." Cole looked at them, then at the queen who knelt by his side, her hand firm against his wound. In that moment, the truth carved itself into stone. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was their protector, their knight. And now, with the coup crushed and the conspirators unmasked, the Empire itself would have to reckon with him. The grand hall of the Vidian Palace had been built to impress, every column carved with the victories of dynasties past, every vaulted arch set with gemstones that shimmered like captured stars. Tonight it was filled to its highest tier, nobles and envoys crammed shoulder to shoulder, their jeweled robes clashing with the dark uniforms of the human delegations seated at the front. Tension hummed beneath the ceremony's pomp. The coup had been suppressed only weeks before, but rumors still clawed through the empire. Everyone wanted to know who had saved the throne and what price would be demanded for it. Cole Payne stood at attention beside the dais, the wound on his shoulder now a faint scar beneath the new set of ceremonial armor they had forced upon him. It was heavier, more ornate than the first, etched with Vidian sigils of loyalty and courage, but he still carried himself like the soldier he was, back straight, eyes scanning the crowd for threats. At his side, Argo sat rigid, his ears swiveling at the low susurrus of alien tongues. The princesses were uncharacteristically composed, seated in smaller thrones at their mother's right. But Cole noticed Lena smothering a grin every time she glanced his way, as though the entire affair was a game she had won. Then Valora rose. The Empress's presence silenced the hall without a word. She wore her war crown, the gilded spines rising from her brow, and robes that shimmered like liquid emerald. But when she spoke, her voice carried not only authority but warmth. "Today we gather not only to mark the survival of our throne," she declared, her voice echoing through the stone, We gather to acknowledge the truth that peace is not preserved by words alone, nor treaties, nor walls of soldiers. Peace is preserved by those who act when others falter. Her gaze slid toward Cole, and for an instant, it was not the gaze of a monarch, but of a woman measuring something precious. Captain Cole Payne came to us as a reluctant envoy of humanity, Valora continued. He became protector of my daughter's shield against assassins, and the one who exposed betrayal in the highest circle of this palace. He placed his body between my children and a traitor's blade. In so doing, he did more than save a throne. He proved that enemies can become allies, and allies can become family. A ripple of shock swept through the gathered dignitaries. Murmurs rose, restrained only by the Empress's raised hand. The laws of our empire are ancient, she said, her voice lower now, more intimate though every ear strained to hear it. They say a monarch may choose a consort not by lineage, but by valor, by loyalty, by deeds so great they cross the boundaries of blood and world. Tonight, before you all, I choose. She extended her hand toward Cole. For the first time since the war had ended, the Hall of Idians fell utterly silent. Every eye turned to the scarred human standing at her side. Cole hesitated only a breath. He had never dreamed of this, never. Wanted courtly titles, never wanted to stand in gilded halls. But when his gaze slid to the three girls, who sat on the edge of their seats with shining eyes, and to Valora, whose strength and fire had become something more than admiration in him, he knew the answer was already carved into his bones. He stepped forward, his gaunted hand closed around hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that blended human and Vidian custom. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the Empress's war crown gleamed above them both. I present to you, Valora declared, her voice ringing like steel, Captain Cole Payne, Royal Consort and Imperial Protector. The hall erupted. Cheers. Applause, the rhythmic pounding of fists to breastplates. Even the human delegation rose, stunned but triumphant. Cole bent his head toward Valora, his voice barely audible above the roar. Not bad for a guy who was just trying to help some lost kids. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Those lost kids knew exactly what they were doing. At that, the princesses could no longer contain themselves. Protocol shattered as they bolted from their seats, rushing across the dais to throw themselves into Cole's arms. He knelt, gathering them against his chest as their laughter rose like music. Valora joined them, her hand resting against his shoulder, her forehead pressing briefly to his in the Vidian gesture of intimacy. The dignitaries watched, stunned, as a new image was burned into the story of the Empire. 3 alien princesses, curled trustingly against a human knight, their fierce mother at his side. Cole had fought wars across 3 star systems, but here among emerald skin and human tan, alien crown and soldier's scar, he finally understood. Some battles were won with fire and steel. Others were won by the courage to embrace peace, and the family it brought dot, and for the first time in 15 years, Captain Cole Payne no longer felt like a man without a home. He had found one in the arms of a queen and the children who had chosen him.